Correspondent. Canada has announced it will levy a 25% tariff on certain U.S. auto imports as retaliation to President Donald Trump's levies that came into effect on Thursday. The country was largely spared from the sweeping global tariffs of Wednesday, as Washington granted an exception to goods compliant with the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, which covers most products. However, Canada, which is America's largest trading partner, is still facing levies on steel, aluminium, and other products in addition to vehicles. The Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, slammed the wave of global levies, warning Trump's trade war could rupture the global economy.
As I told President Trump during our call last week, Canada will respond to the U.S. auto tariffs. And today I'm announcing that the Government of Canada will be responding by matching the U.S. approach, with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA, our North American Free Trade Agreement, and on the non-Canadian content of CUSMA-compliant vehicles from the United States as well.
To delve deeper into the Canadian response, I'm now joined by France 24 correspondent in Ottawa, Christopher Guly. Christopher, Canada has been seemingly spared this round of tariffs, but has announced a retaliatory 25% levy of its own on certain U.S. auto imports. Can you explain us a bit more about that?
Sure. The Prime Minister summarized what Canada's response will be as of today. He underscored the what he called CUSMA, USMCA, the United States, Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement. Yesterday's announcements, the tariff announcements against Canada from Washington, really underscored that agreement. So in terms of compliance, so in response, Canada is also recognizing the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Trade Agreement. It's the North American Free Trade Agreement. I think what Mark Carney's government is doing here is he's putting the emphasis on, look, we had a deal with the United States. Donald Trump signed this in 2020. He said it was the greatest deal ever when it was reached. So if we're going to negotiate with the Trump administration for over the next 4 years, whoever is prime minister, you have to acknowledge that agreements signed should be agreements respected. And I think that's why Canada made a point of stressing that compliance with that agreement is part of the tariff package. Non-compliance, you get tariffed. If you're compliant as a vehicle, you don't face the duties. And also the difference between Canada and the US is that in Canada, the tariffs don't affect parts because parts go back and forth across the border. So that would disrupt the supply chain, the production chain, even more than it already has. Already a Chrysler plant today announced a 2-week freeze on work for workers at a plant following yesterday's announcement. The stock market is tanking today. So what happens next? Who's to know, other than people are going to lose jobs and people are going to pay more for vehicles in the end. The who's to know part is whether there will be a reciprocity between Canada and the U.S. when the dust settles, if it ever does.
And Carney and Trump, speaking of reciprocity, Carney and Trump spoke last week and agreed to further bilateral trade negotiations after Canada's election at the end of the month. Any details as to what that might entail?
Well, it was March 28th, the first call that Trump had with Carney since Carney became Liberal leader. And it was about security and economic security and economic relationship between the two countries. The Prime Minister addressed that today. We're in the middle of an election campaign. April 28th is the national vote. So whether Mark Carney's Liberals form government or Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives form government, whoever the next Prime Minister is, will sit down with Donald Trump and try to hammer out some sort of an arrangement on the security and economic sides. That said, Canada is actively looking for other allies, other partners on those two levels, on security, on the NATO side, and on the economic side. Certainly ramping up trade with the EU. Mark Carney visited London and Paris soon after becoming Liberal leader, and and that's his backyard. He was governor of the Central Bank of England. And he's taking that more broader global approach to Canada's economic and security future, and also there's going to have to be a look toward Asia as well, where there's a growing middle class and there's a deep hunger for commodities, and Canada has a lot of commodities.
Thank you very much for your insight, Christopher Guly, our correspondent in Ottawa.